thanks to Walt Disney, the Soviet animation industry learned how to make quality cartoons. Along with the skills and equipment, Soviet animators adopted the distinctive Western animation style. But very soon, some animators began to break away and experiment with visual approaches in search of originality. The inspiration came from children's books and their strange characters. Think of them as a league of Soviet superheroes. Uncle Styopa is a freakishly tall man and the hero of a book series by Sergei Mikhalkov. Many years before becoming the antagonist of horror games, Styopa used his unusual height to rescue people, well, in the books at least. Here, he takes care of his kittens and spends a lot of time with small children. Style-wise, there's a definite shift away from the Disney style and towards a somewhat realistic depiction of life in the USSR. The stories of Kornei Chukovsky, one of the most prolific Soviet children's writers, were adapted into animation numerous times. The star of Limpopo is Dr. Aibolit, a character directly inspired by Dr. Dolittle. His special power is communicating with animals. Aibolit runs an animal clinic, and when I say clinic, I really mean a picnic table. Seeing how Aibolit is the only veterinarian in the world, he is needed in Africa, and the animals help him get there, except for the part where he almost dies. The sequel film, Barmaley, is not so much about Dr. Aibolit as it is about the two children he likes to hang out with. I'm starting to see a pattern. There is another problem in Africa, a warlord who likes to eat baby animals. Naturally, Aibolit has no faith in the United Nations to resolve the issue, since it doesn't exist yet, and sends his own army, two children, who get captured. How is this even his problem? The main characters are drawn in a kind of realistic style, but everyone else follows Disney logic, like the airplane which needs a bandage on its landing gear. Mojdodyr is another famous Chukovsky story, and is sort of a weird one. The title character is an animated sink or a wash basin, which chases after a dirty little boy. This kid doesn't want to take a bath, so all his toys and clothes run away from him. Mojdodyr summons an army of possessed brushes and whatnot. I'm not sure what sort of a world the story takes place in, but the only time the kid goes outside, he runs into a family of crocodiles walking down the street in human clothes. So I guess that's normal. Various directors tried different animation styles during this period. Hodotayeva's The Little Muck was ambitious, but not very good. I mean, the story doesn't really invite pleasant visuals. With its odd, dwarf-like main character, the witch cat lady, the unattractive royalty, and the magic plants which make the people even uglier. Favorite Heroes is a mix of different animation styles, including Disney, although it's hard to tell with the bad available quality. The film is an homage to popular Soviet movies of the 1930s, and you would have to be a real nerd to get all these references. They are Volga Volga, Jolly Fellows, Alexander Nevsky, Peter the Great, Minin and Pozharsky, Baltic Deputy, The Youth of Maxim, Return of Maxim, Chapayev, and Shores. Adaptation of Russian fairy tales slowly rose in popularity. In 1938, the tale Wish Upon a Pike was adapted twice, as a live-action film and as the cartoon The Tale About Yemelya by Pantelimon Sazonov. Visually, it's an interesting experiment, because to me, the style looks a lot like the Adventures of Tintin. Even the dog looks the same. Coincidentally, Tintin visited the USSR in his very first book, but I doubt it would have been published there, since it wasn't exactly full of praise. Sazonov then set a trend for animation style with The Tale of the Priest and His Workman Balda. No, not that terrifying lost version. This adaptation of a classic Pushkin tale has quality animation with different approaches to character types. Positive human characters, including the strong worker Balda, have a realistic appearance. The comical and greedy priest is drawn as a caricature, and the sea devil and his imps came straight from a Disney cartoon. The film was pretty good for the time and would inspire many future Soviet cartoons based on Russian fairy tales. One of the most influential Soviet cartoons of the period, both in terms of style and content, is Old Man Ivan. The story is a patriotic mix of fantasy and science fiction. The Grim Reaper comes for the title character, who wishes to say goodbye to his 3 sons. Ivan meets his eldest son, who demolishes cute old houses and replaces them with Soviet blocks. Apparently, the newly built houses slide into position on special pathways, complete with residents, like a ship or something. Ivan's second son operates a weather control machine, capable of growing gigantic crops in a matter of minutes. And we didn't even get to the ridiculous part. The third son serves in the Navy, supposedly, as he shows his father an enormous submarine, an airplane which can fly around the world, and the most amazing tank ever made. This indestructible machine goes through mountains and climbs vertical slopes, never slowing down from its rocket-like speed. The character design and animation are in the best traditions of socialist realism, somewhat plain but lifelike. While SMF was making all of those films, there was another animation studio which I haven't mentioned much until now, Lenfilm of Leningrad. The studio changed its name several times, but I already talked about a couple of their surviving films, like Vintik Shpintik, The Post, and that one lost cartoon with a nightmare fuel. Well, by the late 1930s, they were making pretty good color cartoons, although this one, The First Hunt, is subpar. The animation is jerky, and there are many repeated or looping moments, which are signs of lazy animation. The story is not much better, about a seizure-prone puppy who hallucinates birds and gets chased by Cthulhu, I think. The only creative part is a brief moment with a fully animated background for a pseudo 3D effect. Teremok is a good example of Lenfilm animation quirks, limited color palette and sharp outlines similar to a coloring book. But the most unusual details are the characters' sketch lines. You know how artists make sketch lines to help them draw and then erase them later? Well, Lenfilm cartoons usually just leave them in, for a very distinctive character look. The plot is a typical Russian tale about animals living together peacefully in a cabin. Except for the fox, she gets drowned in a lake. The next cartoon, Dzhyabzha, is probably the most unique among Lenfilm's offerings. The specific art style was likely influenced by the Nanai culture, which is the source of this fairy tale. In a snowy nighttime forest, an evil witch has enslaved a girl, a dog, and a frog to do her cooking and chores. The slaves run away all the way to the moon, which apparently is done by climbing a tree, where they remain to this day. Here we can see yet another unusual thing about Lenfilm's cartoons. They're animated almost exclusively at 24 frames per second. This method, which animators call on once, is quite tedious, but results in very smooth movement. 10,000 drawings. That's how much effort went into making The Circus, a 9-minute cartoon, as proudly stated on its title screen. The color version of the film was lost, but even in this unrestored copy, the quality is evident, even if sometimes the action gets a little overwhelming. In The Tale of the Silly Little Mouse, an entire village of animals are trying to put a baby mouse to sleep, but end up terrifying him instead. Due to the unusual way the animals are drawn, they look more like plush toys. the baby mouse is finally entrusted to a cat who, by the way, has her house decorated with mouse skins. Somehow, it turns out to be a terrible idea. Visually, the cartoon shows a few neat tricks with light and shadows. I'd like to end on a positive note. Mstislav Pashenko, the director of Dzhyabzha, began working on a sequel film. But when the studio was destroyed, so was all his work. He even tried to dig through the rubble, to no effect. He was finally able to finish the film at SMF, resulting in The Song of Joy. It begins very similarly to Dzhyabzha, with an indigenous girl and a couple of animals. But instead of starting the Nanai space program, all the girl wants is the coming of spring. Unfortunately, the evil ice witch Polar Night is doing everything in her power to stop that. Naturally, the good prevails, and the girl and the animals welcome the spring with a song, just like millions around the world welcomed the end of the war. If you'd like to explore these new directions in Soviet animation, then I recommend Uncle Styopa and Old Man Ivan. And when it comes to Leningrad animation, I think Dzhyabzha is an excellent example. Well, I can't avoid this topic forever, so in the next episode we'll look at the Soviet wartime animation.